heard you guys talking about, oh, I'm so glad I don't have to worry about this test. This is great.
You know what?
Many of these events.
Ann and I jinxed it. We jinxed it. It was our fault because then all of a sudden we're like,
so vocal about how, oh, it's just so great not having to worry about test. I'm over here sweating like, oh, what's going on?
I think you have people jumping on, Erica.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
We have one person who showed and one person so far.
Excellent.
I was like, listen.
Hi, Lindsay. Thanks for joining us today and sticking with us on our tech issues. We just said if this was like 6 months ago, people might have been really ornery. So the fact that you have stayed with us is fantastic.
Also, if you have the list of folks, try to just email it out because I know Eventbrite, there's always a delay. So if you have that list downloaded and can just send an email from your Gmail, then that could also get people in here quicker.
Yep.
Okay.
Hey, MJK. See,
maybe post it. Maybe post it.
Show up. Mary Jo Kokendorfer. We're her baby. She's a new mom. Everyone give her congrats.
Congrats.
And good luck. Jesus.
Dude, imagine what it's going to be like this time next year when all those COVID babies come out.
Oh,
it's
yes.
Gonna be serious.
People trying to work from home with their 1-year-olds. Ooh.
But everybody's going to be divorced, like, right? Also.
You're so optimistic, Tara.
Aren't I?
Yes.
I'm a realist, friend. I'm just kidding. This has been a really interesting time for relationships, which I know is not the topic today, but I find it's like, I feel closer to everyone and at the same time, like only feel a little bit Mercury, like only a little bit from time to time. And I think that's surprising.
Yeah, it would be great, speaking of relationships, if y'all could just send me a link to somebody that could marry me. That would be super helpful. I wish there were more people on the call that I could just share that with. Like, I want at the end of my presentations, every time I do a webinar, I want the thank you slide and then a slide that says, I'm available. Here are all the characteristics of people that I'm looking for.
Okay.
If you have a guy for me, please message me at hello@jodianbury.com.
I like this approach. I really do.
You know
Erica,
what?
were you able to send out the list by email?
I did. So, but I want to, in like probably 2 minutes or so, just go ahead and get started. We are going to record it. So I have already told people that I will send them the recording as well of the session. Great. So
great.
We'll make it work. So I'll give it like 2 more minutes and then we'll.
Erica, have you posted it on LinkedIn yet? And I know
no, let me do that. That's a good
do it, but you should, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, if y'all have somebody, let me know.
I mean, I love that. I think you should put that slide up at the end of, like, just do it.
People, look at my people coming through. Yeah, man.
What's the worst that could happen, you know?
Where do you live and what are your qualifications?
I live in Seattle. I need someone who is not an asshole.
Well, there you go.
Okay. I mean, that's honestly a really difficult criteria.
Yeah, we've got a lot of people like that.
That's it. Not an asshole. It's just, you know.
Erica, I have the topic for your next webinar, just in case you wanted to know. We're there. So, shall we maybe, what time is it?
We'll have a good talk. I'm not worried.
Jody Ann, will you post the actual link? I am only getting the click here link in my email. If you just want to throw it in the chat.
Also, really quick, Erica, if you right click where it says click here and you it should say copy link.
Oh, should it now?
It should.
Okay.
I mean, let's
This is
see,
great.
but it should.
All right. All right. Let me see. Okay. Copy link address. This is great.
And there you go.
Bam.
All right, do you want me to put it in chat?
I got it.
Okay. What is everyone grateful for today?
Oh, that's a good question. Ooh.
I'm
My kids come home from their dads tomorrow morning. I'm grateful for that. That's something that's weird to be grateful for the day before it happens, I think. But I am, because I woke up thinking about them and how they like to get in bed with us in the morning. And I've missed that the last couple of days. So that's mine.
Breath.
Hallelujah. Look at Dr. Scott. Just bringing the knowledge. What are you grateful for, Erica?
I am grateful that I have literally spent the last week at my parents' house in Augusta, Michigan, where I've literally woken up to like fresh breakfast and smoothies like every
Sounds
morning. And
lovely.
my adopted mother is just teaching my child how to sew and be a beautiful
Sounds lovely.
homemaker.
Awesome.
Probably skills that I hope she never uses, but I'm happy that she's learning them for the sake of life. So yes, I am grateful for some things. I'm grateful that you all are still here. I appreciate you all being willing to volunteer your time. I just threw out the Zoom link on LinkedIn, but if there's no other gratefulnesses, because I don't want to interrupt that. That's beautiful. We'll go ahead and get started. Okay, we are recording. So welcome. I'm so excited to Authenticity in Your Career, Leaning into Being a Disruptor. My name is Dr. Erica Pryor, and this is our third live virtual monthly event. And so we're learning something new every time we do these, which is fantastic. And so I want to do just a couple real quick housekeeping things before we jump into our panel. And if you're listening to this live or you're listening to this afterwards, I appreciate you being here and sticking with us. So number one, this is a judgment-free zone. So I want people to feel very comfortable to say what it is that they have that's on their mind or that's speaking to them. And I want to make sure that we are kind to ourselves and we're kind to others as people ask questions or have comments, that we don't judge them and that we don't judge ourselves for not knowing something or thinking that something should be known. We're going to use the chat function to ask any questions. So feel free to ask any questions that you have in the chat function. We're going to try and monitor those so that we can answer any questions that we have in real time. Feel free to keep your camera on or off. Again, this is a judgment. Okay, so is everybody that's going to log in going to be Erica? So if you're logging in because I sent out the Zoom link, you may want to change your name. Although the idea that there are 25 Ericas populating the room does make me excited. So feel free to do what makes the most sense to you. And just so people know, again, we are recording this session. So if you're coming in halfway through, you'll be able to get the recording and then you'll be able to take a look at the full length conversation. I should ask before we get started, Jody Ann, Tara, Lisa, do either of you have a hard stop at 2 o'clock, or would we be able to carry through the conversation to about 2:30?
2:30,
okay,
I'm good.
Excellent. So we'll still get the meat and potatoes. So the last thing is the disclaimer that this panel is called Authenticity in Your Career and Leaning into a Disruptor. And sometimes that doesn't always look or sound as pretty as you may want it to. So there may be some strong language, and there may be some strong ideas, and I hope so, because as Tara said earlier, like, get upset, get passionate about the things that really get under your skin and that you're excited about. And if, you know, fuck comes out in the midst of that, then be okay with it. Don't be upset about how it was said. Be upset that these things are still happening in the world. And I couldn't agree more. So a disclaimer for those of you, just so that you're not taken too off guard by that. So we are going to go ahead and get going. Again, my name is Dr. Erica Pryor, and I am the founder and chief community builder for an online community of support for job seekers called Epic Career Network. And so just so people are really aware, because it was literally the most authentic thing I could come up with, EPIC does stand for Erica Pryor's in Charge. So I felt like I can throw that out here, because I just wanted to make sure people were really clear about, like, what is the reporting structure? I mean, it's only me, but, you know, what's going on, what's happening, who's running the show, and Erica Pryor's running the show. So there's never any questions about it. It's just built into the fabric of the organization. My two awesome associates are here helping us out, Rachel Murphy and Katie Grimm. And so I appreciate them in the background supporting us. I really started Epic Career Network to support women and people of color as we think about rapid rehiring post-COVID, and to ensure that we had a place and space where we could get valuable feedback from professionals steeped in the field, and that we weren't going to be left behind during that rapid reemployment moment that we anticipate coming up here soon. So last thing in the housekeeping section is that we do have another live event, if you're willing and daring enough to try it out, sometime next month in August, called 10 Ways to Accelerate Your Job Search, working with HR pros and recruiters. So I'll go ahead and add the link in the chat function, and you'll be able to sign up for that event at some point as well. So now let's move on to the good stuff. And we've got folks joining us. So if you're just joining us, please add in the chat function, give us a shout out, tell us where you are calling in from. I'm so excited that we have a very diverse panel of folks from all across the country. So this is fantastic. Oh, we got Harlem, we got California. Okay, this is good.
Wow,
Y'all up early over there too.
Montana. Hello.
Excellent. DC. Yeah. All right, so first up on our panel to introduce is Dr. Lisa Scott, who is a Black Women in Leadership Scholar. She is also the Vice President of Institutional Equity and Inclusion and Student Success at Luther College. And you are calling out of Iowa, is that correct, Lisa?
Correct.
Absolutely, thank you. Welcome for being here today. Our next panelist is Tara Furiani, AKA not the HR. I don't even know if it's AKA. Like, people probably just call you not the HR lady, and
yeah,
really
it's synonymous. It's synonymous now.
Good. She is the host and producer of Not the HR Lady podcast, a web series that is all things people and no BS. She also hosts Not the HR Lady, but I Know Black People, and a live LinkedIn series about white privilege. And then Tara is also you say business coach / therapist. That's taking a leap right there. So I appreciate that. A strategist, a writer, and a mom of 7, and you are calling out of Austin, Texas.
That's
so
right.
Thank
Hello.
you so much for being with us. We got some more coming in. We got New York, we got Cleveland, Seattle, San Diego. I love it. Someone catch you up. You know what? You are right on time. There is no catch up. We are doing introductions, and we are going to carry this conversation out through, so we still get the hour, so you still get all of the juicy nuggets that you were hoping you would get. So no one is late. Thank you for staying with us. Our last panelist is Jody Ann Burry, who is a writer, speaker, and disruptor. She is currently the host of Black Cancer, the podcast, a healthcare and racial equity entrepreneur and DER consultant. She talks about, writes about, speaks about topics around structural racism, microaggressions, the future of work, and of course, showing up authentically, and you are calling out of Seattle, Washington. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Absolutely. Okay, fantastic. So that is the panel today. We have 3 questions that we are going to shoot out here. And then as we are going along, if you have questions, please go ahead and add them into the chat function, because we're going to try and monitor that and ask questions as we go through. If you have your own swag to show, I guess perhaps that's a shout out for people. If you have your own swag to show, this does say Erica, Epic Erica on it. If you can't see it, hire Black people. Tara, I saw. Thank you. Good. All right. Lisa, you got to get.
I have to get some swag. I have to catch up. I have to catch up. I have to get some swag.
Okay, so we have 3 questions. So my first question for our panelists, and I'm going to start with you, Dr. Scott, if you don't mind,
Sure.
is what does authenticity in your career mean to you? And I know when you answer this question, you're going to speak for yourself, but you're also going to speak to the stories of so many Black women that you have collected over the course of your research. And so that's why I want to start with you, because I feel like there's like a good grounding there that you can kind of help us sort of situate around what it means to you, but also what it means when you're talking to other people of color and of difference.
So that's I thought about this question a lot. And so there are times when I'm just feeling out of sorts, and I'm just feeling out of sorts, right? And sometimes I'm irritable. And when I dig into the question and of myself, as to when I question myself and look around my life, typically I am being inauthentic somewhere. Something is out of alignment, and I experience either it physically, intellectually, emotionally, or socially, right? There's a dissonance that happens. And it's being much further along in my career than many of my, my panel mates, it is important. It's being authentic is something you have to pay attention to and be cognizant of. Organizational culture is really powerful, right? Organizational culture is really, really powerful. And over time, you adapt to organizational culture without, unless there's a consciousness about what it is and it's an acknowledgement of what it is. But rarely do we ask the question, so what is the organizational culture, right, of my organization? And how am I in that? How am I acknowledging that? And how am I being in that culture? And so authenticity, I would say, also comes at a cost, right? There's a cost to authenticity. And while we are talking about career, I would say the authenticity comes at a cost across our lives, right? Both at home and at work, right? And so that some recognition for me that I have, so there are times around, this is the time I must speak. So, recognizing that every battle is not mine necessarily, but authenticity comes with a cost, but it also comes with its rewards, right? It also comes with its rewards, and we can talk about that maybe a little bit later on. But it is critical at this stage of my career. So it's interesting, I did my annual goals recently, and one of my goals was to ask harder questions. And and part of that was about authenticity. So people are like, well, no, you asked a question, but did I ask, a really hard, did I push? Am I still pushing? And the last thing I'll say is that what I love about myself is this internal meter that says to myself, like, seriously, this is what you're doing right now? Like, seriously, this is it? Like, you're not pushing, like, really, you're getting a little bit complacent here. And it has always been this sort of, unasked for, but internal voice that says, I'm gonna need you to step your game like way up about whatever, however you live. And in there somewhere, though it may not be the lead story, but in there somewhere is this notion of authenticity.
No, I love that. I feel like there were a couple juicy nuggets to call out of there. First, this idea of understanding the organizational culture and how you're in it, and if there's an alignment. Because I think it's easy to sense that you're like in it and you're not really sort of paying attention and intentional about like, are things lining up with the things that are important to me and how I want to show up in the world. And so really sort of sinking in and figuring out like if you have that alignment around what's important to you and what the organizational culture is. But then also thinking about, and I think this is kind of one of those key signs that you're a disruptor, is complacency and status quo. And are you maintaining the status quo, or are you pushing the status quo to reimagine the space or the opportunity in a different kind of way? So that's
yeah, right. And I'll just say two things, and Tara maybe can speak to some of this. Typically, when you go through an interview, people don't really speak about the organizational culture, because that takes work to really acknowledge what it is and know what it is, right? That's one. And then the two, you're not going to really see on most job descriptions, and be a disruptor, like interrupt the status quo as part of the job description. You're not really going to see that hanging out there. So I'll just say those two things, yeah.
Excellent. Tara, do you want to pick up and give us an idea of what does authenticity mean to you?
Yeah. So I talk a lot about this. Obviously, it's kind of the hallmark of what I've created for my brand. And there's a really good reason behind it. I am an adopted kid with interracial parents. I'm a mom of 7. I adopted my niece and nephew 2 weeks after having birth of twins. I have literally experienced racism, misogyny, sexism, bigotry, harassment, bullying in the workplace as a C-level executive. I have been an executive at the C-level, at the top for 12 years. I've been in my profession just under the C-level for 9 years prior to that. And that's something that has happened to me a lot in my career. I've experienced really, really horrifying things that nobody should ever experience. And I was silent. I was silent for a long time. And for a long time, that was because of fear. I was the breadwinner for my family. So I couldn't lose my job. I couldn't make a fuss. I couldn't speak the way that I wanted. And then I lost my dad. My dad passed away, and he's my hero. I talk about him a lot. And he passed away in 2016. And I had to come to Jesus with myself. And I said, Tara, what the fuck are you doing? Your coworker just called you a fucking bitch. And you were like, just fine with that. And if they're doing that to me, a literal fellow C-level colleague, what are they doing? And oh my God, what have I let happen? And for me, from that moment forward, it was like, I had to throw away every ounce of fear that I had and start championing in the way that I think I'm supposed to, but I've never been allowed to. And I think a lot of people who are, chief HR leaders are often put in that interesting predicament, right? We're not allowed to really be authentic because we sort of have to be the company person and have the company letter and toe the company line. And that's really hard for a lot of people to do, because you go between, well, this isn't exactly illegal, but it doesn't exactly feel good, right? And I decided one day, like I said, when my dad passed away, that I had to stop. I had to stop living a lie, because I was wearing a mask that didn't swear at work, that didn't show tattoos that I have, that didn't that tolerated people using racial epithets at me, being belittling with microaggressions, mispronouncing my name repeatedly after I've worked with you for a year. All of those, reasons kind of said to me, you're living a lie, and that's doing absolutely nothing for anyone. And as a person who has fought their whole life alongside my very activist parents to affect change, to bring equity, to bring inclusion, to bring, safety to all people, especially in the workplace. They were both very, very big champions for that. As somebody who lived that growing up, I was embarrassed with myself. And I had to stop doing it. And I decided to start Not the HR Lady and start telling the truth about what things are hard to talk about. And so for me, for my career, it's completely shifted it. I went from hating having to be this person who had to wear such a different mask than I am as a person, had to compromise my own integrity, my own morals in some instances, to not, lose my job. has really given me a huge platform now to know that other people are in the exact same boat as I was. And so I am allowed now to be authentic, and I encourage everybody to, because all the things I tolerated, we shouldn't have to. So I am encouraging everybody to really think about what authenticity looks like to you and how to be true to yourself, because you don't want to look back and go, I was complicit. I potentially stopped somebody from getting a job. I let an aggressor stay in an organization when I could have done something about it. And that's a lot of guilt to carry. So stop living a lie now and start figuring out how to be a person that can just be you. And trust me, you'll find the people who love it and embrace it.
No, that's excellent. I love that. And I love just that you had an aha moment, because I think a lot of us, you've had the moments that you think would be aha, that you didn't really get the lesson out of it.
Right.
And I myself have been in those situations where I did not get the lesson from that moment that should have been aha. And I had to relive that experience a couple different times. But, you know, part of that authenticity in your career is recognizing, whether it's a professional or a personal moment, that there's an aha moment where you say to yourself, no more. Like, and I mean, for many of us, you do wear a mask, like, and you feel like you have to. And for frequently, we're told that that's the process. That's how you get ahead, is by masking yourself and what's true and significant to you. But I think that there is that moment that comes eventually where you say, okay, we're done with it. Taking off the veil.
No more. Yeah, no more.
Fantastic. Jody Ann, what does authenticity in your career or life mean to you?
Authenticity is bullshit. Just to be honest.
I'm so glad you're on the panel. This is excellent.
You know, when we're in environments, work environments, where we're asking people to be authentic and bring their authentic selves to work, it is putting disproportionate burden on people who are already behind, people who are already fighting to be heard and understood. That's women, that's people of color, that's queer folks, that's all these people who are already marginalized. We're like, you should be your authentic self, right? But the environment in which they're asking us to be authentic is not authentic. They're asking us to come in mask free. We get into an environment where actually wearing the mask is what allows you to move ahead, right? And so authenticity and showing up authentically, particularly when you're already have a marginalized identity, is the biggest risk to your career. It is also the thing that can empower you and really put you in your purpose. If you really sit, and when I sit and reflect, I mean, get yourself a book and really write out and reflect on, what does it mean to be me? What is the thing that's causing so much friction in my work environments, and getting grounded on what that is, and then finding the space to be that. And so the reason why in my LinkedIn thing, I describe myself and position myself as a disruptor is that I have been told from undergrad to graduate school into my professional life that I'm disruptive, right? And being fired and reprimanded and losing opportunities because I'm disruptive. And when I sat with myself and said, okay, what am I trying to do here? I settled on like, yeah, I'm a disruptor. I'm going to be disruptive. That is going to be part of my brand. And that allows me to find the right spaces for me to really ground myself in the work and the purpose that I'm trying to do. Now, this, I think that friction is why disproportionately there's so many Black and Latinx women. I think it's 170% increase of Black and Latinx women who have exited traditional work to become entrepreneurs, because they're trying to find the right spaces for them to be authentic. And our current traditional work environments do not allow that. And the last thing I'll say, and this is what I reflected on, I know a lot of y'all watch Hamilton recently. When I was watching that, I was just like, oh my gosh, look at all this Black excellence. And I looked at all these talented folks and I'm like, wow, do y'all have other jobs? You know, what could it be like if we let these folks truly express themselves and truly show their talents across the arena, right? will these people ever get hired in other theater productions? I think the same way with Orange is the New Black. Look at all these incredible actors, women of color, queer women who are showing up and trying to play these new roles. Will they work again? Do we have environments that allow that? And I feel the same way in my life. And so when I think about authenticity for me, I try to ground myself in what is actually causing friction in these white dominant environments, and then actually leaning into that and finding the space to be that unapologetically, knowing that it's risky and being willing to take on that risk. I will risk a job for my own mental health, and that's my personal decision. And you have to ground yourself in what you're willing to risk in order to reach your goals.
No, that is excellent. I want to call out a couple juicy nuggets in there because I think that they're so salient. Number one, hire Black people. Number two, which doesn't always get airtime in the conversation, is that being authentic is risky. Like, there's a risk. There's more of a risk for some than others, as indicated. And if your authenticity is, you know, white and male and majority, then it's less risky for you, especially if the organizational culture that you are in reflects that authenticity back to you, right? So I think the risk is definitely something to call out and think about. And then the other thing that I think is important is figuring out like what's most important to you and how you want to show up, you know, because you can, as Lisa said, you can't hit every battle. Like, there's going to be stuff that happens that sometimes you're just going to have to let that roll off your back. So what's most important to you and how you want to show up and what you sort of want to do with that, I think are really important. I saw, Tara, on your LinkedIn feed, someone was like, where was this panel 6 months ago? You know, and I love that because, you know, one of the reasons that I wanted to do this panel was part of my own like authenticity and my career and self journey. And it really wasn't until about 6 months ago that I was just like, you know what? F these MFers. Like, I'm with you, Jody. I'll quit a job. I will quit a job for my mental health. I will, and I have delivered groceries for Shipt rather than come to your workplace. Because at least when I deliver groceries for Shipt, I'm appreciated. I get paid what I'm worth. And people tell me that I'm doing a great job, and that's what I'm looking for. So, you know, thinking about like what is most significant to you, because as Lisa said, when you have that misalignment, it is like you're living the mask version of yourself, where everybody's interacting with like, hey, the Erica Breyer, that's fun, and is a team player, and then the actual version of yourself. And it's a lot of work to maintain those two kind of people out there in the world. So great, I love that. And we are getting some amazing feedback. Somebody said, I think this came through, that they wanted to take a look at Tara's LinkedIn profile because some CEO thought it might be about them, and it was. Another one, if you can't be honest at the C-suite, where are you going to be honest at? And that's the honest truth as well. Like, you think, oh, well, you've made it to the highest levels, you're able to sort of be free, speak freely, and, you know, have some level of movement. And that's really a misnomer for a lot of folks as well. Okay, so I want to move on to our second question, and we referenced this Entrepreneur magazine slideshow that talks about 10 signs that you are a disruptor. And so I want to start with Jody Ann, because you are so vocal about I'm a disruptor. I'd love to hear you tell us, of those 10 signs, what are the 3 signs that you most identify with as a disruptor, do you think?
Yeah. First and foremost, I think if you're grounding yourself in disruption, that you don't even need to read something like this. Like, you wouldn't need to understand the characteristics of being a disruptor because it is embodied within you. And so that's just my first remark on that whole list.
Wait, I'm gonna jump in there though. I'm gonna jump in because disruptor is, I feel like, is new sexy language. And before, people were talking about disruptor, like my whole life you're creative. And so it's like, well, you know, creatives are difficult to work with anyways. You know, creatives are always trying to shake things up. So I think only from the perspective that we're using kind of this language around disruptor, you may have not recognized yourself as such because maybe you were identifying differently. But I get you. Like, once I read the list, I was like, oh yeah, I guess I'm a disruptor. Like,
I know, but that's the thing that I want to impress in here is you have to be grounded in yourself, right? And I read the list and I kind of get the game of posting things online and creating content, but I just want people to know that when you want to figure out who you are, you have to go within and just like not on the internet. Like start with yourself first. And so that is my thing on there. But when I read it, I did see some nuggets. And so my top 3 that I liked, knowing that the rules don't always apply to you. Second is you work only where you have something to offer. And I think we spoke to that before. And 3 is defining your own factors for success. And so I think what's critical in knowing that the rules don't always apply to you. I remember, you know, I'll just say this. So I got selected to be a speaker for TEDx Seattle recently, and I was super pumped about that. I sent in my application, like I felt really good about that whole process. While the decision-making on who would be a speaker was happening, this racial reckoning with anti-Blackness was also happening. And that made me feel like if I get selected, they're only gonna pick me because I'm Black, not because my work is good. And that has been really messing with my brain, right? Like, I want to feel like I deserve this, that I worked hard, and this whole like myth of meritocracy and earning that position to be a TEDx speaker. Now, meritocracy is a fallacy. There are many people who get opportunities because they're cousins with somebody, because they went to the school, same school with somebody. Like, there are all these ways that people get ins on things. And maybe their work is not even good. And so that I've raised here because knowing that these rules don't apply to you is saying that these standard structures of how you think things work isn't actually how things work. And especially as a Black person, a woman of color, a woman, just like who I am, the rules just won't happen for me. Right. And so I need to figure out new ways to orient myself of like what it means to be deserving of something, what it means to work hard, and how you climb through things is just like all these cheat codes that people have is the game. Right. And so just thinking more broadly of, you know, how to gain access to things, how to create work, and knowing that the standards of how that happens is just not going to be, you know, applicable to my life.
No, excellent. I think you hit such a great point with the rules don't apply to you. Like if you're a person of color, of difference, you have a disability of any variety, like the rules always already do not apply to you. These rules weren't made for you. They weren't set up to allow you to succeed. And in fact, the rules that you're playing by are completely different. And, you know, realizing early on that the rules that people are following don't apply to you is very empowering, because you can then sort of start looking at the undercover rules that people are operating by and applying to you, that you were perhaps playing the game with, that you didn't even know you were playing the game with. Lisa, Dr. Scott, if you think about 3 characteristics from this entrepreneur list about being a disruptor, what 3 might be most salient for you?
Oh, I kind of want to say, have a little bit of disclaimer, like similar to Jody, to say that, so as a Black woman, I'm just disruptive because I'm a Black woman in a white space, period. So that's, so disruptor has a negative connotation, and what it also suggests is there's something we're disrupting, right? There's something being disrupted. And that is a whole other kind of conversation, because what is it that you're disrupting, right? And so when I become authentic, does it mean I'm disruptive? Don't know the answer to that, but that's a question, right? But and so I think the term is something I would love to have a discussion about. I'll stop there. Because it frames it in some ways disruptive, and being disruptive, to Jody's point, is framed as a negative, right? And I don't see myself or my work in that. And so it's interesting that, I don't know who coined the term, but it's interesting that was the word. And when I look at so I'm an academic, so when I look at the thing there's something negative about it, right? It's disrespect, it's just something, it's not something. And so that's a whole other conversation used to frame and describe the work that I do. So that's a conversation. But there are three things, and one of it is about my, how I define success, right? And so, people define success around money, et cetera. And I've been interviewed and people have said, so how did you become successful? And I was interested. So what makes you think that I am? And what is the rubric that you are using, right? And I think usually it's money and status, it's positionality. And I would say that my experience is that there are a whole bunch of folk who, including myself, who have been in particular positions where they weren't particularly successful. And part of that is this notion of, I'm not afraid to face tough problems. Like, in fact, it's a strength of mine, right? I will walk right into a storm. It's a strength of mine. We'll do it. I come from that kind of family. I'm not here to play. We're gonna get it done. And so that's one. And I think the other thing is that I'm really interested in my impact as opposed to my position and status. Like, am I impacting the communities, the students, the whatever I'm trying to do, versus did I just take this position because it's a great position and it affords me X, Y, and Z, right? And so those are the three things that, but again, this thing around what defines success and how we look at factors of what makes a person successful, because you can certainly have titular positional power and have zero institutional and organizational power. Like, you can have that title and can't move a needle, right? And then you can have influential power in an organization that is not tied to position and get things done via relationship, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that for me, so when I look back over my career, because this is my second career, higher education is my second career, it has usually been walking against the water. Water's coming this way, the flood's coming, and I'm walking against it. I've almost never been one to, oh, look what everybody is doing, I should jump on that. I should jump into that fray. And I just want to say really quickly, one of the things that Jody talked about is, yes, not only is meritocracy a myth, and there are a different set of rules, I would say that the rules change depending on the who. The rules shift depending on the who. That, like, oh, that we didn't tell you that. There's a cliff. Now that I've fallen off the cliff, here's the rule. But what I would suggest is the rules are really fluid depending on the who of who we're talking about.
Absolutely. I love that. And I also, of course, I have to appreciate your challenge of the language disruptor as well, because as noted, it's sexy now. 10 years ago, people are telling you you're disruptor and they're trying to usher you out the door.
Exactly.
You're not appreciating that, right?
Exactly.
And as you said, women, people of color, people of difference have always already been disruptive. So people are, it's only now that we see, white men taking on this role of being innovator, disruptor, that it has this level of cachet and prestige to it. But there's never been an instance where I've been told that I'm a disruptor up until 2020, and it was meant to be positive, productive, or an opportunity for promotion.
Well, and then this notion of disruptor, so I'm more, the focus is on the disruptor, not the thing being disrupted, which gets to continue being what it is. And so we'll talk about these women or men, and we'll talk about this group of people who are disrupting, and we'll put the spotlight there, as opposed to the organizations right, that there's something that needs changing, that there's something that needs interrupting.
Right. Or that
Right.
there's something that's simply being interrupted. Like
Right.
in
Right.
that
But the focus is on,
of it.
in many ways, if you're talking about women and people of color, back to someone's point, maybe Tara's, you're talking about, still the focus is on historically marginalized people in a way that there's a one-off, right? It's a plus one, like, let's talk about these people who are disrupting, but not about traditional historical organizations and environments that really need to be disrupted, right? So that's a bit of what's making that sexy, because that's really what the work is, not on me. The work is really on the organization, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Excellent. Tara, I see you. You want to jump in here. What do you want to say?
Oh man, Dr. Scott, I couldn't agree with you more. And I hate the notion of disruptor. And I also love it at the same time. And hear me out on this. I am all for challenging the white male patriarchy that is, plaguing. And I'll say this really strongly, that is what is wrong with so much in corporate America today. And I don't think any of us disagree with that. So I love disruptor in the sense of, what are we disrupting? We're disrupting bullshit. We're disrupting a thing that we shouldn't have to be disrupting, but it's time we did. So better we say something like, we are affecting change, we are trying to be change agents for, but sometimes I really think like we need to get in there and disrupt. And the sense that I think about it is, when I was reading the article that you sent, the article before the slide deck, there's a reference to using your social capital. And so that is something that I think is really interesting, and exactly my train of thought when thinking about doing what I do and leaving corporate America and starting to challenge the status quo, challenge the fact that companies were saying they were doing X and not doing it, challenge the fact that, we talk about equity or, having companies who are more aligned from a wage disparity standpoint, closer to the I make $1.02 instead of 81 cents. But not actually walking the talk, talking about Black Lives Mattering, and this isn't new, right? I mean, Black Lives Matter, everyone's talking about it now, but this is something, one, Black lives always have mattered. And two, this isn't the first time this has been a thing, if you will. I love that everybody is talking about it and championing all of these various opportunities for us to just be better people in the workplace, better people in general. But that's where, when I read the article, it was way more, and when I read the slideshow, I started thinking about, I don't know how much of this I necessarily agree with, but one of the things I do know that I can do, that I can affect change with, that allows me to be authentic, is to use that social and professional capital that I have. I have worked with companies all over the world. I count several really top CEOs as people that I work with on a one-on-one basis. And for me, that's a really interesting way to start showing a bigger picture, a bigger inflated view of how you affect change. So like, to everybody's point, you can throw content up and you can challenge on LinkedIn. Jody Ann said, it's social and you can do it on the internet, but also that's not it. That's not all that there is to it. There's way more that has to be done. So on an individual level, how do we, kind of come in and be disruptors, and what does that look like? But better, how do we use our voices and our social and professional capital to affect change at the top where it is needed? It's the companies, to Dr. Scott's point, and to Jody Ann's point, the companies are broken. Like, it's not, I can come in and disrupt. I can come in, you can hire me as a DEI consultant, or everybody's, hiring for DEI roles right now, which I love. But also when I get there, what's the plan? Because you just hired somebody to be a change agent for your organization, and yet you don't have any idea what they do. You probably don't have your C-suite bought into it yet. Like, this is not just words, right? Coming in and being a disruptor in social media, being a disruptor in an organization, being an agent of change for what really this should already be a thing, is an interesting, like, misnomer, if you will, because so many of us are disruptive. We are doing all of these things, and yet the barrier is still at the organizations who have the power to hear that disruption and do something throughout their organization. And that's what I am solving for. When I read the article, to your point, Dr. Scott, the not afraid of facing tough problems. That's what I've spent my whole career doing. Every organization I've worked for has hired me to fix the fuck ups that they have created themselves. And that's something I love. I thrive on that, because if I can pick at you and point at you and keep poking, eventually, and my hope anyway, is that you start to see a shift. You start to see people who go, oh shit, I get it now. Oh wow, when I say that we have a problem when we don't have enough women executives, we don't tell the recruiters, don't interview any men. That's not it. That's not it either. Like, you, right? There's a whole process. There's a whole plan. Everybody's in it together. And I think the other thing is the power of the person. So this entire session is about authenticity in your career, and the four of us being disruptors in the space, or change agents, or whatever vernacular we want to use, but leaning into helping people see a better way of doing business, a better way of treating people, a better way of living together in a dynamic work environment where everybody and their amazing lived experiences is seen and heard and accepted and valued. You know, we have the opportunity to do that, and that's the power of the person. So I really resonated with that, in the sense, back to your social and professional capital. What do you have to bring to the table? And that to me is everything. You know, that you don't need a title. You don't need a fancy education. You don't need to have worked at any of the big 5 accounting firms. Like, you don't have to have credentials necessarily. What you have to have is a passion and a power and a voice, and a willingness to share it, whatever it is that is your calling, whatever it is that you are passionate about, where you see an opportunity to help others and maybe affect change by lending that voice authentically, and be that powerful person. So for me, I think that's huge. I think being that person who has that capital to offer and change is critical.
Awesome. I love that. And I love the comments about loving to dig into complex, meaty problems. I think for people who are disruptive, that's, you know, that's like bees to honey. You just really love challenging things that are going to make you think, and that you're going to be able to utilize your influence, because as you said, you can have lots of positions and have all the title, but you're more disruptive without the title, without the title, without the position. And just because you are someone that people will listen to, and you've been able to capture their attention. Jody Ann, what did you want to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to reflect on it. Thank you so much for that, Tara. I think you raised a lot of critical points. When I was reading the article and they talked about not being afraid or to answer tough questions or something around that, I just wanted to point out that this like Black girl magic, superhuman capabilities that we ascribe to women of color to just, you know, push through these insurmountable barriers and whatever. Let's ground it here, right? It's not that I'm not afraid to ask tough questions. I am afraid. I have like a physiological change that happens in my body when I'm about to speak up. But it's that I'm afraid, and I do it anyway because what I want to accomplish requires that. Right. And so I want to make sure that we don't position ourselves, or at least me, I always try to make sure I don't position myself to be this superhuman person that can always overcome these insurmountable challenges and barriers. It sucks sometimes. Right. And being authentic means that you try to push through anyway, regardless of those costs and those risks and that fear.
Excellent, thank you. And that, I mean, that really leads into our
Erica, can I just make a comment?
Yeah.
So two, I just want to thank Jody for that comment, because in particular as a woman of color, there's some assumption that women of color are up to doing funky tasks that other folk don't want to do, right? So the higher education is my second career, and I used to work in health and human services, and I always got the tough kids. Give them to Lisa. Right, I've got the tough kids, and there is a whole bunch of residue and role expectations around the work that women of color can do and are interested in doing. That said, I guess what I really love is the complex nature of a problem. Right, I really like the multi-layered. I like peeling back an issue, more than, you know, taking out the trash, like, and lifting the heavy bale, right? But I do love facing a complex issue. I like problem solving. I like getting in and figure out where that nugget is and how do we rewire things. So I'm a fan of systems. And so that's kind of where that is. And I also want to speak to Tara's comment around social capital, because one of the things as a Black woman that I have very little of, right, in predominantly white spaces is social capital, right? I just don't have, I don't walk in with it, and my colleagues walk in with a capital that I don't have, right? And so it takes me a while to gather it. One of the things about being a disruptor, I think the element is in being honored, is my cultural capital, right? Is that I do possess a great deal of cultural capital, which really does position me as a disruptor, because I want to use my cultural capital, right, to do my work, to affect decision-making, to understand the problems that I address, that I actually use my cultural capital, meaning the wisdom of my mother and my grandmother and those who came before, meaning understanding how I relate to people, right? That the way that I interact with people, meaning how I honor people, meaning how I understand the world, how I understand the problem that is at hand, and not even from a problem perspective, right? How I see opportunity, who needs to be at the table, who needs to be in the conversation. Much of that comes out of a cultural, so what I do possess is cultural wealth. And one of the pieces around being a disruptor, one of the elements of that is forcing that cultural, is forcing folks to acknowledge and to deal with and to respect that cultural wealth, right? To that cultural knowledge in a way that historically is not. Because social capital and predominantly white spaces look very different, right, than social capital in really diverse spaces, right? Cultural capital is much more, for me, is of an equalizer, because we all kind of possess it. Now the question becomes, whose cultural capital gets honored, right? Right? And so some of my work is to get the cultural knowledge of students, faculty, and staff, of others who have been historically marginalized, and that can be disruptive for organizations, right? But it's a really authentic place for me, right? When I operate out of my cultural kind of knowledge and wealth. And it has been just an incredible strength for me for me to dig in, not just in my work, but in my own well-being, right? When I can stay true, because I have these women, that's exactly right. It is totally Yoso's cultural wealth model. I don't know who wrote that, but that is exactly who it is. But it is this, when I have these women on my shoulders saying, nope, you're right. You know, my aunt and those who have gone on before me saying, stay right there. Like, stay right there, don't you move, because you're good. And to Jody's point, I know it's scary, but stay right there, right? I know it's scary, but stay right there, so.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. I love this. And people are blowing up here in the chat function. One thing that's interesting is coming out from CJ, who, in thinking about like role and influence, she says, you know, she's been in corporate America, and in many instances, because she's been the only Black woman in corporate America, she has been pushed into a DEI role. And for many of us, that's exactly right, because again, your presence is already disruptive. We don't know what to do with you. We assume that this is the role you want to take on. And I think to Jody Ann's point as well, like there's definitely a lot of narratives that undercut the amount of work that goes into these complex, difficult problems, and it gets boiled down to Black girl magic, women can do anything, you're amazing, like, and you don't get to then have flexibility, and you don't get to be visible in the things that are important to you, and then that work frequently goes unrecognized. And so I think many of us can sort of attest to that being part of our experience as well as a disruptor, and trying to, you know, figure out how you position yourself. So Tara, give us an idea of how you think you position yourself as a disruptor. And everyone, this will be our last question. So if you have some questions that you want to add to the chat, we are going to turn our attention to that just shortly.
So for me, I think I do a lot of storytelling. I've lived a lot of interesting life experiences just from my childhood all the way through, growing up and becoming a person and entering the workforce and that sort of thing. So I think for me, I position myself as a disruptor through helping people understand what's going on in a way that's not necessarily textbook, or in a way that's not, here are 10 steps or 5 steps to being a better, I try to tell personal stories that help you see, why would you ever treat somebody like this? How has this ever happened to you? What in the world, and they're all true and they're all lived. And I think that, with that comes people understanding that I'm a person who has certainly done my fair share of being complicit while having so many life experiences that absolutely lead me to a calling of, I can't just be fearful to lose my job. I have to stand in front, stand loud, stand proud, and yell from the rooftops that it's not okay that I am marginalized in the workplace. It's not okay that I am paid less. It is not okay that, my brother can't get a job because of the color of his skin, or he's looked over for promotions because he's a Black man. It's not okay that my bringing a woman to an event causes people the reaction to say, oh, I didn't know you were a gay. I have so many interesting stories, and I think hearing them from a perspective of somebody who's just very candidly sharing them with you is certainly one way to help resonate and help people get fired up about the things that I'm fired up about, which is any type of harassment, bullying, bigotry, sexism, racism in the workplace, because I've lived it. I have friends that have lived it, and we just can't tolerate it anymore. There's zero reason why the fact that I have a vagina should make me somebody that you pay less, or the fact that my brother's skin is Black, or my sister is a lesbian, or my son is transgender. There's no reason why, and there's no logical in any regard belief that would allow me to sit back any longer and just say, you know what, okay, I guess I'll get paid less. I have to jump in, I have to be in the fire, and I have to shout from the rooftops. And doing so has, I think, based on the feedback I've been given, empowered other people to do that, and to start talking and looking in their own companies, and to start affecting change, and to start going, you know what, I'm not going to be, just because I am the only Black woman here, does not mean I am going to lead this charge for you. This is just not, it's not okay. It's a no for me. It's giving that ability and hopefully sharing a loud enough voice where people feel empowered to kind of go, you know what, I don't have to take it either. And I think if enough of us do that, maybe we can get to a place of at least just a closer playing field, but certainly a lot less tolerance for those brilliant assholes in the workplace that so many of us have to deal with. And instead, get the good people kind of who are there to be culture champions and change agents and do good for your organization. That one brilliant asshole, man, they ruin all of it, and we're just not taking it anymore. So that's sort of how I've positioned myself. And for me, that's the most authentic I can be. I tell stories that people don't tell on LinkedIn because I want you to know my experience. I want you to hear my voice, and maybe that will offer you a different perspective where you can then change, maybe where you can reflect on your own stories.
Absolutely. And I think that gets at one of the questions that's coming in by Anne, which is thinking about how do you sort of stay grounded when you are getting feedback and you're hearing about issues that are really distracting and not part of the actual core issue that you might be facing or challenged with in the workplace. And so for Tara, I hear one of the things you saying is that you stay grounded by realizing that you no longer want to be complicit.
That's
and
right.
regardless of what sort of space you're in, you are going to to speak up because you've spent enough time being complicit that now is the time every day to
That's
speak
exactly
up.
right. That you are exactly right.
Excellent. Lisa, would you give us your perspective on how to stay grounded when you're getting feedback that's really distracting and not a part of the core issues or what's most important to you, perhaps in the workplace or personally?
Sure. I mean, I think staying grounded is critical work, right? And staying grounded also means staying healthy, right? So self-care is so important, regardless of the work, but it's particular when you're doing DEI work, if you are a Black or brown person. But I think throughout my career, both in social services, health and human services, and in higher education, it was really important to I had community. It was really important for me to create community. This group that cared about me, that kept an eye on me, who I could tell and be absolutely authentic with, and, you know, bang my head on the wall and say, you know, you're just not gonna believe what happened. It was a highly confidential group, maybe 3 people, mostly 2, but they were highly confidential, you know, but these were people, these were my go-to. Hey, I'm getting ready to walk into a meeting and, you know, here's what's going on for me. And these were seasoned folks who could say, listen, tell me who's in the room. I know this group. Here's what you might consider, here's some things you might consider doing. And I have to tell you, I could actually give you examples where that really helped me grow as a professional, and really stay in a thorny situation and see my way through it to the other side, and ask hard questions. So and part of it was relationship driven. So let me give you a quick example. But there is this notion of question asking, and really, what is the question that we are trying to get to? Because as someone said earlier, you've got this kind of, you know, we've got this real commitment to DEI. We really do have a commitment. We really have a commitment. We wrote it down. We wrote our commitment down. See, it's in our statements. We really do have it. It's right here. And then you say, well, but here's the outcomes. Right, but here are the outcomes. Can you talk about the tension between the outcomes and what the commitment is? Can you talk about that tension? And so part of it is really having a grasp of what's going on organizationally. It's really having a grasp about that. Part of it is really having a community to stay grounded in. I don't know if you have a meditative practice. I don't know, because the culturally dominant group, typically the work is to maintain that culturally dominant group. Right? Recognizing, as somebody said earlier, I think it was Jody, you know, am I being called in to do this work because I am a brown woman and it's time to bring brown women in? Or is there real, or maybe Tara has talked about this as well, is it time to be, for this organization to move authentically toward a more inclusive and equitable, more importantly, environment? So I say all that to say that part of it is recognizing the environment you're in. Right? If you're in an organization, or even nonprofits where I used to work for, and these are quote unquote the good white people. These are the people who quote unquote, and I would say this is where the frustration happens so much of the time. Right? Because you went to work for this nonprofit because they believe in, you know, saving the whales, and yet in this nonprofit organization there is racism, there is sexism, there's homophobia, right? Which is, you know, as I listened to a podcast last night, I listened to Ibram Kendi last night. If you're going to work on all, you got to be working on all. You got to be working on all. So I just say all that to say that part of this is really finding those activities and exercises that keep you grounded. Have a group of small group of folk whom you can really tell your truth to and help them guide you. For the successes that I do have, they are rarely something that I did alone. There was a group that, you know, said, help me negotiate, navigate till this day. Hey, here's why I think I want to move in this conversation. And no, by the way, the people don't have to be in your workplace. The people do not have to, that group does not have to exist in your workplace. And then lastly, recognizing the environment you're in, right? That if it's a culturally dominant group, be it white, be it whatever, if that's a culturally dominant, and it's been that group for 150, 200 years, that's the group, and there's going to have to be some hard question asking. And then you have to make a decision. Is this the environment, as others have said, that I can be authentic in? Is this the environment that I can live in and not be sick in? Then you have to ask yourself some hard questions, because your choice is, once you recognize what it is, can I do the work? Can I bring my best self, my authentic self to this, or can I not? And then you have to make decisions about how you want to be in that organization.
Absolutely. I love that. Those are great parting thoughts. I really appreciate making sure that you surround yourself with a community, and then also finding the true allies who are going to be honest with you and who are going to provide you with real guidance and feedback as you go into those challenging moments within your workplace. So we're wrapping up here. Tara, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with us? Oh, you're
all right, muted. I'm just so grateful that you had